Hacker's Test.
Section 2. You will hear a tour guide describing the features of the Trentham estate to visitors. First, you have some time to read through questions 1 to 6. Now listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 6.
Good morning. I'm pleased to welcome you all to the Trentham estate. Although much of the estate was destroyed in the early 20th century, the government was able to recover some areas of the structure, which we will be viewing today. However, before we get started, there are a few precautions I must make you aware of. First of all, we'd be grateful if you could not go into any areas like the gallery that are blocked off with red ropes. These act as barriers to restricted spaces that have not yet been fully restored and are unsafe for visitors to walk through. Secondly, here in Trentham Hall, I caution you to refrain from touching any of the building remains. These are historical artifacts that need to be preserved, and touching these pieces can cause damage to them. And I can see that we have some children with us today, so I'd like to ask you kids to watch your step as we proceed up the clock tower stairway later. The stairs are made of large stones, which are very uneven, so it's quite easy to trip and fall in the stairwell. Just make sure to hold on to the wooden railings as you go up and down. Now, I'll take a moment to describe some details about the history of the Trentham estate to you all. The building originally served as a home for the royal family, and there are signs that it also had a church on the grounds at that time. It was then briefly used as a monastery for priests. After that, it was sold to wealthy businessman James Leveson in 1540. It stayed largely the same for several hundred years before several important additions were made by 18th century architect Charles Barry. Mr. Barry was very interested in the design of English country houses like this one. He was the designer of the clock tower, which was called the riding school, not to mention the entire right wing of the estate. This included a massive greenhouse, which is unfortunately no longer here. Sadly, despite all of the additions made to the estate over the years, it was destroyed by its owner in 1912 due to pollution from the River Trentham, which is next to the estate's grounds. There were attempts to sell the estate to the government, but they didn't succeed. It was a great shame because the building was very well constructed. So all that remains of the structure now are just shadows of what it once was. In particular, the gardens, which you can wander around later this morning, were once the site of the building's ballroom.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you can read through questions 7 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 7 to 10.
Actually, I think I'll explain the layout of the gardens right now, seeing as we can peek at them just outside this window here. They're rather beautiful, aren't they? The gardens are spread over 1 square kilometre of land and surrounded by a densely wooded forest. If everyone could take a look at the map, it will show you how to get around. As you can see, it includes the river and the car park as well as the gardens. In the middle of the grounds there is a magnificent fountain just off the east path, along which you can also see some exotic Ethiopian roses growing. These flowers were imported by the Duke of Sutherland, who resided in the estate in the late 19th century. Also of special note on the other side of the east path is a small circular path that goes around the fish pond. This is just below the car park on the map. A Victorian-style bridge spans over this pond, making it an ideal spot to take a beautiful picture with the Trentham Estate in the background. You can even see what remains of some estate buildings on the opposite side of the river from that viewpoint. Across the path from the roses is the clock tower, and if you head east from the tower, you will find a maze, which is great fun for all the family. The entrance is on the southern side of the maze facing the River Trentham. And for those of you who enjoy viewing wild animals up close, you should definitely check out the Trentham Monkey Forest before heading back home today. It is just beyond the car park, on the other side of the gardens from the clock tower, and that's where you can purchase admission tickets. OK, if there are no questions at this time, let's begin our tour.
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers.